At my wedding, my younger brother tried to sabotage me by spiking my champagne. I didn't scream. I didn't expose him. I didn't even flinch. I switched our glasses. When he stood up to toast, smiling, confident, playing the role of the loving little brother everyone adored, he lifted the glass meant for me and drank deeply. 10 minutes later, in front of 200 guests, my new in-laws, and our entire family, he collapsed straight into the wedding cake. People say a wedding reveals who truly loves you. Mine revealed who never did. For years I was told to be patient, to be understanding, to protect him. But standing there in my white dress, watching the consequences of his own actions unfold, I realized something painful and freeing at the same time. The person I had spent my whole life shielding was the one who had been quietly trying to destroy me. And this time, I didn't save him. My name is Hannah, and for as long as I can remember, I was praised for one thing above all else: being strong. Be the bigger person. You're the older sister. You understand better than he does. Those sentences followed me through childhood like rules carved into stone. My younger brother, Ethan, was 4 years younger than me and infinitely more protected. He was the miracle baby, the long-awaited son, the one my parents spoke about with softened voices and lowered expectations. When he cried, the house stopped. When I cried, I was told to calm down. "Don't make things difficult, Hannah," my mother would say, her hand already reaching for Ethan. "He didn't mean it," my father added, before I even finished explaining. I learned early that intent mattered more than impact, at least when Ethan was involved. If he broke something of mine, I was careless for leaving it out. If he embarrassed me in front of relatives, I was too sensitive. If he crossed a line, the line quietly moved. And I adapted. I always did. I became the responsible one, the quiet achiever, the daughter who didn't cause scenes. Teachers loved me. Friends trusted me. Adults said I was mature for my age, which was just another way of saying I had learned to swallow discomfort without making noise. Ethan, meanwhile, learned something else entirely. He learned that charm erased consequences. By high school, he knew exactly how to play people. A crooked smile, a joking tone, a way of saying hurtful things just softly enough that if I protested, I looked unreasonable. "Relax. It was a joke. Wow, you really can't take anything. You always think I'm the bad guy." And every time, my parents backed him up, not loudly, not aggressively, but consistently, in that quiet, devastating way that tells a child exactly where they stand. I left for college the moment I could. I told myself distance would fix things, that adulthood would smooth out the rough edges, that Ethan would grow up. I grew up. He just grew bolder. While I worked my way through internships and late nights, Ethan bounced between plans. Music one year, business the next. Nothing ever stuck. And somehow, none of it was his fault. There was always a reason, always someone else to blame. And somehow, I was always expected to help. "Hannah, you're stable. Hannah, you're good with money. The Teljing and two can bear. Hannah, you can handle it." Handle it. That word became my burden. By the time I met Daniel, I was exhausted in ways I didn't yet have words for. He noticed things I had stopped noticing: how I apologized, even when I wasn't wrong, how I tensed when my phone buzzed with a message from home, how I laughed off comments that clearly hurt me. "You don't owe them your peace," he told me once. I wanted to believe him. But family has a way of convincing you that survival is the same thing as love, and for a long time, I confused endurance with loyalty. By the time I got engaged, I truly believed the worst was behind me. I was wrong. And the closer my wedding day came, the more I began to realize something unsettling. Ethan wasn't losing me. He was losing control. And that terrified him. Getting engaged to Daniel was supposed to be the beginning of something safe. He wasn't flashy. He didn't raise his voice. He listened, really listened, in a way that made me realize how often I'd been talked over my entire life. When he asked me to marry him, it wasn't in front of a crowd or with a camera pointed at us. It was quiet, intentional, and real. My parents smiled when I told them. They hugged me. They said all the right things. Ethan didn't. At first, he joked. "Wow, guess you finally found someone who can tolerate you." Then he laughed, like that erased the edge in his voice. When Daniel's family invited mine to dinner, Ethan came along unannounced. He dominated the conversation, told exaggerated stories about our childhood, and somehow managed to turn every memory into a version where he was charming and I was difficult. "Oh, Hannah's always been intense," he said, grinning at Daniel's mother. "She likes things a certain way." I smiled so hard my jaw hurt. As the wedding planning began, Ethan inserted himself into every detail. He offered opinions no one asked for, questioned choices that had nothing to do with him, made comments just loud enough for me to hear. "Must be nice to marry into a family like that. I hope you don't mess this up. Guess you're really moving on now." Moving on. From what, exactly? From being available? From being useful? Daniel noticed. I tried to downplay it. "That's just how he is," I said. But Daniel's expression didn't change. "That doesn't make it okay," he replied. The closer we got to the wedding, the more Ethan hovered. He offered to help with things I had already handled. He insisted on being near me during tastings, fittings, meetings, always watching, always listening. At the rehearsal dinner, he raised a glass and made a speech that sounded supportive on the surface, but felt wrong in my bones. "To my sister," he said, smiling wide. "The woman who always thinks she knows best." Laughter followed, polite, uncomfortable. I caught my mother's eye, hoping just once she'd intervene. She didn't. That night, lying beside Daniel, I stared at the ceiling and tried to calm the growing unease in my chest. "Do you trust your brother?" he asked gently. I opened my mouth to say yes. Nothing came out. Because for the first time, I was forced to confront a truth I'd been avoiding for years. Ethan wasn't afraid of losing me. He was afraid of losing his place above me. And as my wedding day approached, his jokes stopped sounding like jokes at all. They sounded like warnings. The morning of my wedding should have been calm. That's what everyone tells you, at least. The hotel suite was filled with soft music, the scent of fresh flowers, and women moving carefully around me with curling irons and makeup brushes. My dress hung by the window, glowing in the early light. On the surface, everything was perfect. And yet, my body refused to relax. I couldn't explain it. My hands were steady, my smile practiced, but something deep in my chest felt tight like a quiet alarm I had learned to ignore years ago. The same feeling I used to get as a child right before Ethan crossed a line, and everyone pretended not to see it. When he knocked on the door of the bridal suite, unannounced, that feeling sharpened. "Relax," he said when I looked surprised. "I just wanted to check on you." "Check on me." The words sounded caring. The tone didn't. His eyes lingered too long, scanning the room, the dress, the people around me, as if he were measuring something, calculating. "You nervous?" he asked, reaching for a glass of champagne from the tray the hotel staff had brought in. "A little," I admitted. "Figures," he said lightly. "Big day, big expectations." He poured the champagne himself and handed me a glass, his fingers brushing mine. The contact was brief, but the discomfort it left behind wasn't. Throughout the ceremony, Ethan stayed close. Too close. When guests congratulated me, he stepped in beside me. When Daniel's relatives spoke to me, Ethan inserted a comment, a joke, a story that redirected the attention back to him. During the reception, he volunteered to keep my glass full. "I've got you," he said, lifting the bottle before I could respond. "You shouldn't have to worry about anything today." I thanked him automatically. That old reflex kicked in, the one that told me refusing him would only cause trouble. But each time he handed me a drink, my stomach tightened. The glasses were identical, clear crystal, no markings, no differences. At one point, I noticed him slip something back into his pocket after leaning over the table. When I asked what it was, he laughed. "Nothing. You're imagining things again." Again. The word echoed louder than it should have. Then I saw Laura across the room. She wasn't smiling. Her eyes were fixed on Ethan's hands, then on my glass, then back to her phone. Seconds later, my screen lit up. A message. Short, sharp, impossible to misunderstand. "Don't drink. Watch him." My breath caught. I looked at Ethan, my younger brother, the boy I was taught to protect, the man standing far too comfortably in my space on the most important day of my life. And for the first time, I allowed myself to think the unthinkable. What if this wasn't about control anymore? What if this was about humiliation? What if Ethan didn't just want my attention? What if he wanted my downfall? I didn't move. I didn't react. I simply held the glass in my hand, smiling for the guests, while my mind raced through every moment I had ever dismissed. And slowly, painfully, the pattern became impossible to ignore. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was intent. And I had only seconds left to decide what kind of ending this story would have. Time slowed in a way I had only ever experienced once before, when you realize something irreversible is about to happen, and your body demands a decision before your mind is ready. I looked down at the champagne in my hand. Clear, innocent, exactly like every other glass on the table. Across from me, Ethan was laughing with one of Daniel's cousins, relaxed, confident, completely at ease. He glanced at me, caught my eye, and gave a small nod, almost encouraging. "Drink," the gesture seemed to say. "Smile, be grateful, be quiet." My pulse thundered in my ears. Laura's message burned in my pocket like a warning flare. She hadn't told me what she saw. She didn't need to. The urgency in her words said enough. I forced myself to breathe slowly. Panic wouldn't help me. Accusations wouldn't help me. I had spent my entire life watching how this family responded to discomfort, and it was never in my favor. If I confronted Ethan, he would deny it. If I made a scene, I would be blamed. If I refused the drink, I would be accused of overreacting. I had been trained for this moment my entire life. So I chose a different path. I waited. Daniel leaned in and whispered, "You okay?" "Perfect," I said softly, and hated how easily the lie came. Then opportunity arrived, wrapped in politeness and heels clicking against the floor. Daniel's mother approached the table, elegant and composed, drawing Ethan's full attention the way powerful people always did. His posture shifted instantly. His smile widened. He stood to greet her, turning his back to me completely. That was it. My only chance. My hands didn't shake. That surprised me the most. I didn't lift the glasses that would have been obvious. Instead, I slid them across the tablecloth, slow and controlled, switching their positions with a movement so subtle it looked accidental. The crystal barely made a sound. 1 breath. 2. I adjusted my napkin, smoothed my dress, returned my hands to my lap. When Ethan sat back down, he glanced at the table for half a second, long enough to reassure himself, not long enough to notice the truth. "Ready?" he asked, lifting the glass now placed in front of him. I met his eyes and smiled. "Whenever you are," I said. Inside, something shifted. Not fear, not anger, clarity. For the first time in my life, I wasn't protecting my brother. I wasn't managing his emotions. I wasn't absorbing the damage so everyone else could stay comfortable. I was choosing myself. And whatever happened next, whatever truth came out into the open, I knew one thing for certain. I would never be silent again. Ethan stood, glass raised, shoulders squared like he was about to deliver something important. The room responded instantly, chairs quieted, conversations softened, forks paused midair. 200 people turned toward him, smiling, expectant. This was his moment. He had planned it that way. "Can I get everyone's attention?" he said, his voice carrying easily. "I just want to say a few words." Applause followed. Polite, warm, earned, in their minds. Ethan had always been good at this part, being seen as thoughtful, charming, harmless. He glanced at me, then out at the crowd. "My sister," he began, smiling broadly, "has always been intense. And her pays down nay." A few chuckles rippled through the room. "She likes control. She likes plans. She likes everything to be perfect." He tilted his head, as if amused by me. But I guess that's what makes today so special. Someone finally decided to put up with her. More laughter. Louder this time. I felt Daniel's hand tighten around mine under the table. I didn't squeeze back. I needed him steady, not worried. Ethan continued, warming to the sound of attention. "Hannah's always been the responsible one, the serious one, the one who thinks she knows best." He lifted his glass slightly. "So today, I just want to say, relax. Let go. Enjoy the moment." He brought the glass to his lips and drank. I watched his throat move as he swallowed. Once, then again. For a brief, fragile second, nothing happened. Ethan lowered the glass, smiling, clearly pleased with himself. His eyes flicked toward me, searching for something: anticipation, maybe satisfaction. I gave him nothing. Minutes passed. The band resumed playing softly. Servers began moving again. Conversations restarted in low murmurs. Ethan sat down, leaned back in his chair, and crossed his arms. Too confident, then I saw it. A small pause in his movements. The way his smile didn't quite reset. The way his eyes blinked one time too many, as if the room had shifted when he wasn't expecting it to. He rolled his shoulders, subtly, like someone trying to shake off tension. "Everything okay?" my mother whispered to him, concern flickering across her face. "Yeah," he said quickly. "Just warm." He reached for his glass again, took another sip. Slower this time. I felt my heartbeat in my throat. Ethan's words began to come out differently after that. Not slurred, nothing obvious. Just delayed. Like his thoughts were arriving half a step behind his mouth. He laughed at a joke no one had made, asked a question, then forgot he'd asked it, shifted in his chair, then stilled, as if realizing movement required more effort than it should. Daniel leaned closer to me. "Something's wrong," he murmured. "I know," I said quietly. Across the table, Laura met my eyes and gave the smallest nod. Confirmation. She was watching everything. Recording everything. Ethan tried to stand again, maybe to excuse himself, maybe to reclaim control, but his balance wasn't what he expected. His hand gripped the edge of the table too tightly. The motion drew attention this time. "Ethan?" someone called. "I'm fine," he insisted, but the confidence had drained from his voice. Just dizzy." The room began to quiet again, this time not with anticipation, but with uncertainty. He took one step, then another. His foot caught slightly on the edge of the carpet. Not enough to fall, just enough to expose him. Gasps rippled through the guests. Ethan's face changed then. Not fear, not yet. Confusion. Genuine confusion. The kind that strips away performance. "I think," he started, then stopped, pressing a hand to his temple. "Something's wrong." I stood slowly. Not to help him, not to accuse him, just to be seen. "I think we should get assistance," I said calmly, my voice clear enough to carry. Now, every head turned toward me. Ethan looked at me then, not with arrogance, not with mockery, but with something closer to panic. "What did you do?" he whispered. I didn't answer. Because this moment wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about winning. It was about letting the truth stand on its own without me carrying it, explaining it, or protecting the person who caused it. As Ethan staggered forward, losing the careful control he had spent his life perfecting, the room finally saw him without the charm, and once they saw it, they couldn't unsee it. For a moment no one moved. Not because they didn't care, but because no one understood what they were witnessing yet. Ethan stood there, frozen between confidence and confusion, his body no longer responding to the version of himself he believed the room still saw. His mouth opened slightly, as if searching for words that refused to arrive on time. "I'm fine," he said again, louder now, almost pleading. "I just need a minute." But his body betrayed him. His hand slid across the table, knocking over a glass. The sound, sharp and fragile, cut through the room far louder than any scream could have. Heads turned. Whispers began. Daniel was already halfway out of his chair. "Ethan, don't move," he said calmly, stepping closer. "Just stay where you are." That calm, that controlled authority only seemed to unnerve Ethan more. "I said I'm fine," Ethan snapped, trying to straighten up. "Stop looking at me like that." He took another step. And that was when everything gave way. Not in a dramatic crash, not in a sudden fall. It was slower than that, more disturbing. His balance shifted wrong. His knee bent at an angle it wasn't meant to. He reached out instinctively, grasping for stability that wasn't there, and found only the edge of the cake table. The cake tilted. Someone gasped. Someone else whispered, "Oh my God." Then gravity finished what arrogance had started. Ethan went down, his shoulder colliding with the table, sending plates sliding and decorations tumbling. The cake collapsed under its own weight, not violently, but decisively, like something that had been unstable for a long time and finally couldn't pretend anymore. The room fell into absolute silence. No applause, no laughter, no music. Just the sound of breathing, uneven, stunned, collective. Ethan sat there amid the mess, staring down at himself, frosting smeared across his jacket, his hands shaking as if they belonged to someone else. His face had lost all color. His eyes darted around the room, searching for reassurance. For rescue. For anyone to take control. "Mom?" he called weakly. My mother rushed forward out of instinct, her heels slipping slightly on the floor. "Ethan, sweetheart." "Please don't," Daniel said firmly, stepping between them without raising his voice. "Let the medical team handle this." Medical team. The words landed differently than help. They made this real. Ethan tried to push himself up, frustration replacing confusion. "Get this off me," he muttered. "This is embarrassing." And then, without meaning to, without planning to, he said the one thing he could never take back. "This wasn't supposed to happen," he whispered, his voice catching through the microphone that had fallen close enough to pick up every word. A pause. Then, quieter. "Not this glass." The room seemed to inhale all at once. Daniel froze. Laura straightened immediately, her professional instincts snapping into place. My father's face changed, not anger, not denial, but something closer to dread. "What did he say?" someone murmured. Ethan blinked, realizing too late that he had spoken out loud. His eyes widened, unfocused, panicked. "I didn't," he started. "I mean Hannah." I stepped forward. Not fast, not emotional. Every step felt deliberate, final. "I never drank from my glass," I said, my voice steady enough that even I barely recognized it. I set it down. I didn't touch it again. Whispers erupted now, no longer polite. "That doesn't make sense." "Why would he say that? Did he switch?" Laura raised her phone slightly, not as a threat but as a fact. "I recorded the interaction earlier," she said. "Everything." My mother turned to me, her face breaking open in a way I had never seen before. "Hannah, what are you saying?" I looked at her. Really looked. "I'm saying I was put at risk," I replied. "On my wedding day." The paramedics arrived moments later, their presence grounding the chaos into procedure. They asked questions, checked vitals, took notes, treated Ethan not as a golden child or a victim but as a patient whose condition had a cause. "Good thing this was caught early," one of them said quietly. "It could have been worse." Worse. The word echoed in my chest. As they lifted Ethan onto the stretcher, he reached for me, his fingers brushing air. "You didn't have to let this happen," he said weakly. I met his gaze, my voice low but unwavering. "I didn't let it happen," I said. "I stopped protecting it." The doors closed behind him. The room stayed silent long after he was gone. And for the first time in my life, the consequences weren't mine to absorb. They belonged exactly where they should have all along. The reception didn't end right away. That surprised me. For several minutes after Ethan was taken away, everyone stayed exactly where they were, as if moving would somehow make what just happened real. Glasses sat untouched. Conversations stalled mid-thought. The air felt heavy, thick with things no one knew how to say out loud. My parents were the first to break. My mother turned toward me slowly, her face tight with shock, and something that looked dangerously close to anger. "Why didn't you stop him?" she asked, her voice trembling. "You could have said something." I felt Daniel's hand slide into mine, grounding me. "I did stop him," I said calmly. "I stopped myself from drinking." "That's not what I mean," my father cut in. "You let this happen in front of everyone." I took a breath. A deep one. "No," I replied. "What happened was the truth coming out. I didn't create it. I didn't hide it anymore." They stared at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. Laura stepped closer then, her presence steady, professional. "For clarity," she said evenly, "there's audio evidence, timestamps, witnesses. This isn't speculation." My mother's shoulders sagged slightly. My father looked away. Daniel's family remained quiet but not distant. His mother approached me gently, placing a hand over mine. "I'm so sorry," she said. "You didn't deserve this. And you handled it with dignity." Dignity. I had never been praised for that word before, not when it mattered. The hotel manager approached, hesitant. "Would you like to pause the reception?" he asked softly. "Or continue?" I looked around the room. Some guests avoided my eyes. Others watched me carefully, waiting to see what kind of woman I would be now that the story had shifted. I straightened my shoulders. "This is my wedding," I said. "We'll continue." The band resumed. Slowly, at first, then steadily. People began to move again. Some guests, family friends, Distant relatives made quiet excuses and left. Others stayed. The ones who mattered. As I danced with Daniel under the lights, something inside me loosened. Not joy exactly, relief. Later that night, when the room had emptied and the adrenaline finally faded, my phone buzzed with a message from my mother. "He's your brother. He needs you. We can fix this." I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I typed a single reply. "I am safe. That is not negotiable." I turned my phone off. Because some endings aren't about forgiveness. They're about boundaries. And for the first time in my life, I was choosing one and keeping it. The days after my wedding felt unreal, like I was moving through someone else's life. There were no headlines, no dramatic apologies, just silence, heavy, deliberate silence punctuated by notifications I didn't open and phone calls I didn't answer. My parents tried at first, careful messages, soft language, the same familiar tone that had always asked me to understand without ever asking Ethan to change. He didn't mean it. He's still your brother. Families work through things. But something inside me had shifted permanently. For the first time, I wasn't confused. I wasn't questioning myself. I wasn't replaying the moment, wondering if I had exaggerated, if I had imagined it, if I had somehow caused it, because the truth had been witnessed, recorded, acknowledged, handled through the proper channels, calmly and clearly. Ethan recovered physically, I was told. Medical professionals did their job. Legal professionals did theirs. Boundaries were documented instead of debated. No yelling. No scenes. No dramatic forgiveness arcs. Just accountability. Daniel stood beside me through all of it without once telling me what I should do. He never asked me to reconcile. Never pressured me to keep the peace. When I struggled with the guilt that still crept in late at night, the old instinct to fix everything, he reminded me gently. "You didn't cause this. You ended it. That mattered." We returned from our honeymoon to a quieter life. A safer one. My phone no longer felt like a threat in my pocket. My body slowly learned how to relax without waiting for the next violation, disguised as concern. Months passed. Then a year. I stood in our kitchen one morning, sunlight spilling across the floor, my hand resting over my stomach as Daniel moved behind me, steady and warm. We talked about the kind of family we wanted to build, not in reaction to the past, but intentionally, thoughtfully. "No secrets," he said. "No silence," I added. "No one is protected at the expense of someone else." I didn't lose my brother at my wedding. I lost the role I was forced to play my entire life, the one where my pain was invisible and my responsibility was endless. What I gained was far more valuable. Clarity, safety, a future built on consent, respect, and truth. People sometimes ask if I regret what happened that day, if I wish I'd handled it differently, if I would go back and save him. I don't hesitate anymore when I answer. My wedding wasn't ruined. My life wasn't broken. That day didn't destroy my family. It revealed it. And in doing so, it finally gave me permission to choose myself and never apologize for it again.